Okay, so here we are, our final exam projects. So these are worth 10% of your grade. So make sure you listen carefully to what's required, what you are supposed to be doing. You have two options. You get to choose one or the other. Okay, so option one is going to be to create your own sustainable economic system that can survive pandemics. So you are now the supreme ruler of your own nation. And based on what we have learned this entire semester about GDP, growth, inequality, economic sectors, households, firms, modeling, the environment, COVID-19, the economic game that we played at the start of the semester when we were learning about creating jobs and building businesses and borrowing money from banks and making payroll, and also what we've just learned about supply and demand and um, stimulus and government role in helping to run economies. So, taking all of that into consideration, create your own pandemic proof economic system. And you can do this individually or you can do this as a team with one other person. So, to do this, what you need to do is first explain how you will manage production and consumption using the model below, and then choose three main industries to run your economy. Okay, so the model below is looking at that balance between consumption and production, because in an economy, you need to have some kind of goods or service, right, that's being bought and sold and produced so that there's a way for resources to be circulating, monetary resources, material resources, labor resources, right? And then the production, something you need to be making, um, and a way for you to be making it. All right. So let's go take a look at this. So when we're looking at consumption, we're looking at how your goods and services get out into the community and the world. And when we're looking at production, we have the three parts of production: labor, land, and capital, right? Money. So who's your workforce? How does land get used, owned, traded, distributed, and money, right? How is money used? Where does it come from? How is it regulated? How is it distributed? So thinking about this, you're going to think about three main industries in which you will run your economy. So remember when we were looking at the CIA World Factbook and we're looking at information about different countries and we're looking at their GDP and looking at what percent of their GDP went to agriculture, went to manufacturing, industry, went to services, right? For example, when we studied um, different economies, we're looking at what kind of percentage did they have of those goods, services, agriculture, okay, to run their countries. So think about that with your own country. Then what we're going to be doing is presenting this idea as either a 5-page written paper or a 5-slide PowerPoint presentation. And the PowerPoint, ideally, we could do it as a team and you could talk us through it and we could all be listening. Or you could also record it and send it in as a recorded PowerPoint. But I think it's better if we could all share in it. So let's see what we can do with that. So in this option one, there's 5 slides or 5 pages. And the first page would be looking at your overall economic system. So it explains how it works, how it's regulated, the role of the government, the people, the industry, and include a model or a design, right, describing how your system works. So if we're looking at, for example, the United States, where we have our households on one side and we have our industry on the other, and we have the workers engaging in the industry and then also being the consumers, and we have the government sort of in the center helping to regulate that through taxes and legislation, okay, that could be a model, right, describing how your system works. And you could use that model, you could use a different model depending on how you want your system to be. If you think about Singapore, right, Singapore was a country that we looked at that was 100% services, right? All of their economy was based on services. They don't have industry or agriculture in Singapore, okay? Other countries we look at have ownership of resources. We saw that with Venezuela. And Venezuela has their entire economy based on the sales of oil. Okay, and then from that, which the government owns, they then use the revenue from the oil to pay for the goods and services for the population. So providing them with housing and education and healthcare. Except the problem that we had with that was the sustainability, because when the price of oil went down, then the entire country lost all of their livelihood, right? So think about that. Think about what is your economic system going to be, okay? And then introduce the main industry one and tell us how that good or that service works. Okay, so let's say I'm going to create a country, and let's say my three main industries, I'm going to choose a natural resource, water. So I have a lot of water, and I'm going to use that to be able to trade and sell because fresh water is valuable. Another resource that I have is agriculture. So since I do a lot of work with quinoa, let's say my country grows quinoa and I can produce quinoa, I can export that. I can also use it to feed my own population. And let's say my country also provides a service. So I've worked with knitters in the past, knitting clothing for people, working with women in the Andes Mountains. So I will say my third part of my economy is the service of knitting. Okay, so I can get contracts from companies all around the world to knit for them, and that's labor, right? So I can make sure that my population is engaged, that people are working, that they're fed, that they have jobs, and those are my three main industries. So if I was to do slide 2, right, and present my main industry, maybe I'll start with water, okay? And what I would do is explain how they got out of to the community and the world. So do I have a water pipeline? Do I sell it on barges and ships? Do I bottle it? Am I keeping it for my own population? Right? What is the way that I'm going to be turning this good or service into part of my economy? All right, and I would be explaining how labor, land, and capital is managed and used in the production of this good or service. So is the water going to be owned by the government and the government sells it and then uses that income to take care of the people? Or is it going to be private industry where maybe I can have more innovation and competition? The government is alleviated from having that responsibility of managing that resource. Instead, I can put it in the hands of capitalists, in the hands of private industry, and then just get taxes from them as a way to help support the government. But the industry themselves are working with the development and sales of that water. Okay, so you guys get to think about that, right? How is that going to work? And what would be a picture, graphic, or model, okay, that I would use for this? So if I was going to be saving my water in big tanks and maybe having pipelines of water that I can send out to other countries, I would find pictures of something like that. I could hand draw a picture also if I wanted to show the relationship between the ownership of the water, perhaps jobs created, and revenue generated, right? And then I would do the same thing with my next industry. If I was looking, let's say, at my quinoa as an agricultural project, how does that work? And then my third industry would be the knitting. And again, you want to be thinking about ownership. Are you going to be using invisible hand, free enterprise? Are you going to have something more government supervised? Are you going to have something a little bit of both? So think about that, right? What's going to be the ownership of the industry? And then the last piece is the conclusion, right? How is this a resilient, sustainable system? Explain what checks and balances will ensure your citizens and country's well-being for generations to come, right? How do I make sure that we don't sell all of our water until there's none left? How do I make sure that the people who are knitting are well paid and working in safe and um, prosperous conditions, right? And how do I know that my farming, my dependency on that quinoa, is something that's going to be able to support us in the long term? And you get to use a picture, graphic, or model. So you can be totally creative with this. There's no right or wrong answer as long as you're able to give us the details that we're looking for in this project. Okay, so that's number one. That's your first choice, is to go and create a sustainable economic system. The second choice, if you're thinking, oh my goodness, that's too big, I don't think I want to do that, or maybe you're just wondering what else is there, the second choice is to come up with a plan. Okay, so instead of doing an economic system, you could do an economic sustainability plan. So with this, we'll be working with the Sustainable Development Goals, and you get to choose 3. And in this case, you're an economic advisor for the US government during a time of pandemics and economic uncertainty, okay, kind of like now. And so you get to decide what 3 goals are you going to be addressing in this time of extreme change, and what needs to be done. How is it going to be led, right? Is it going to be government led? Is it going to be are you going to use market mechanisms? How is it going to be enforced? What kind of incentives are you going to be having? So if you think about our most recent unit, when we're looking at COVID-19 and we're looking at that incentives for developing a vaccine, or supply and demand when we're looking at the lack of products that are needed, or the change in how people manage their supply chains, right? So think about those kinds of things. How is that going to be addressed? What is success going to look like? And how will it have measurable goals? How will you know that you've been successful, right? So for example, and here's our sustainable development goals, right? Maybe I'm going to work on goal number 10, reduced inequalities. Maybe I'm looking now, I'm the advisor to the US government during a time of pandemics. Well, now I'm facing a 20% unemployment rate, right? I'm facing the possibility that a lot of my small businesses have closed and won't open again. And I'm facing the possibility that this could be long-term unemployment, and that if people are unemployed and they don't have money to spend in the economy, then even when I open my economy up again, no one's going to buy anything. So what I can do then is choose to have a national income, a guaranteed minimum income for everybody in my country. And what I can do then is have the government distribute an amount of money every single month for every family, so that everybody can have a minimum amount to be able to live off of. So you might think, oh my goodness, how are you going to do that? That's going to cost a fortune. Well, there's other countries that are already doing programs like this. If we look at Belgium, if we look at other countries in Europe, they've already started working with this kind of system. It's sort of like what we think of with Social Security, but it's for everybody. So everybody has a minimum economy that they're able to live off of. And then what that does is it redistributes the money. Because when people are given the base amount of money to be able to live off of, they can then buy the goods and services that they need. So they can buy the food and the health care, the child care, the home furnishings, the clothing, whatever it is they need to be able to have a good level of living. And then also it gives them stability so that they can have jobs and move themselves comfortably through the economy. So that would be one solution that I would be offering for reduced inequalities, having that national income, right, where everybody has an income. So if we're looking at this, okay, how do we do this? So let's go take a look at our directions for option 2. So we're going to submit our plan as a 5-page written paper. Okay, it could be 12-point double space with graphics, or a 5-slide PowerPoint presentation. Okay, same as the other option, except this time our slides are going to be a little bit different. Slide 1 is going to be an introduction. It's going to tell us what our plan is, what goals are we addressing, and how. So let's say I'm choosing to address number 10 by having that national income, and then I'm going to address number 15, life on land, by having continued low usage of cars. And I'm just kind of looking at the sustainable development goals and see if that fits in someplace better. Maybe I would call that climate action or responsible consumption and production. I think I would call that number 12, responsible consumption and production, where I now have a mandatory limit on use of cars per family. Okay, so now we've already had this experience of not driving, and I want to continue to have that happen. So I'm going to have restrictions on car use. So that's going to be goal number 12, to help have responsible consumption, to help keep the environment clean. And then I'm going to move it on to number 3. That's going to be good health and well-being. Nope, I'm going to move it to number 8. So I'm going to choose number 8, decent work and economic growth. And what I'm going to do is require that all businesses have a percentage of their work that's done at home. And what that would do is cut down on the amount of commuting time that people have to have and maintain this lower level of driving that we're currently experiencing. So those will be my 3 things. I'll be addressing goal number 10, 12, and 8 by distributing an income to everyone, requiring less car usage, and making it mandatory that a percentage of work is done at home. All right, so I'm going to introduce my plan, the goals it's addressing, and how. And then my second slide is going to be talking all about the first goal. Okay, so like I was talking about the idea of the minimum wage for everybody, right, and income. So if I'm going to have that, I would explain how it works, when, where, and how. So how much money would everybody get? How often would it happen? What would be the requirement? And I would look at keeping everybody at above the poverty line at an $18,000 a year income for a period of time. Okay? So we could think that out more, put a little bit more rules around that, exactly what that's going to look like. Where's there an economic theory there? Okay, and what's the rationale for that plan? And then I can have a picture graphic or model. Okay, I go through that. I do that with my next one and next one, right? So each of our 3 different goals are kind of presented in a little bit more detail. And then our conclusion is going to tell us how it worked, right? It's 5 years in the future. The government has taken your advice and done what you recommended. Now, what does the world look like? Right? So my world would look like a place where people have a more relaxed work environment, less driving of cars. They still have a level of disposable income, but it's not generated at the cost of polluting using fossil fuel burning cars. Okay? So that's the final project. All right, so you have those 2 choices. One is to make a plan, and the other one is to make a system. Okay, so applying what we've talked about in class and putting it together in a way that you can share, okay, as a PowerPoint, 5 slides. The whole presentation would probably be about 7 minutes long, or you can do it as a 5-page written paper, okay, 12-point double-spaced. Excellent. Well, I look forward to seeing your projects. Either one of them can be done individually or with a partner. Okay. Let me know if you have any questions.